All right, what is going on, Patriots fans? This is Jason Cole back with the Patriot Drive podcast. With the draft now behind us, there's still free agents out there that New England can sign and can continue to improve this roster. So today we're going to come at you with three of our top players that New England should target. All of them on the defensive side of the ball, so stay tuned to know who those are. But make sure you guys like, subscribe, comment down below what you guys think of these players and if they fit, and maybe you have someone else in mind. But without any ado, Cole, who's the first player that the Patriots should be looking into?
Yeah, and don't expect any huge names on this list because the Patriots do not have a lot of cap space. They need to actually create cap space to probably even sign any of these guys in the first place. So, first guy though, Ndamukong Suh. He's 35 years old. He's getting older. He did play in all 17 games for the Bucks this past year. He had 6 sacks this past year, and in 2020 he also had 6 sacks. A guy who is more of a run stuffer. He's getting older. It should be a cheap deal, 1-year deal. Just a guy that can kind of maybe if Godchaux's not having his best year, you can kind of mix and match the two of those guys to play next to Barmore and have one guy to help him out, help Barmore out with the run game. So, like I said, a guy who's big, guy who's a little bit older, it would be a cheap 1-year deal. And at the end of the day, one of the biggest needs of this team still is somebody to help stop the run. And they didn't really address that in the draft. So I think this is a great spot to look for some players like a guy like Suh. A couple other guys we'll mention that you'll hear coming up here. But he's a good run stopper. He has some things left in the tank as far as being a pass rusher. He's a big dude, a guy who can kind of move people around. So he's not going to be some dominant interior pass rushing threat. But if you pair a guy like him and Barmore together, I think that's a good 1-2 combo.
Yeah, and he brings a nastiness to the field. Every time you play, there's always something about him. He's always got a chip on his shoulder the way he plays. And like you said, I think he's playing not his best football. I mean, he's not in his prime anymore at the age he's at and the amount of snaps he's played. He's played over 11,000 snaps in the NFL. Like he's dwindling. It's just been a lot of wear and tear on his body, and he's playing one of the toughest positions to play. With injuries and stuff. So bring him in a year contract, see what he's all about. Maybe you can find a defensive tackle, whether it's in free agency next year or in the draft again. And he can come in and fill a role both on the field as a leader and off the field. I think that he's kind of a locker room guy that some people might not be able to stand, but he's going to hold people accountable, and he's going to be someone that people will at least look up to and respect, in my opinion.
Yeah, that signing would kind of remind me of when the Patriots signed James Harrison. Not at his best days, but a guy who brings kind of a nastiness, a physicality to the team. A guy that's not going to be everybody's best friend necessarily on the field. And maybe that's something the Patriots could use in the run game because you need to be physical with some of these teams like the Titans and some of the running backs that these guys have, the Colts. You can't just get run over by these guys. And a guy like Suh, I think, would come in here and bring some physicality and would kind of make it so these guys are embarrassed if you get run all over. It's not like something that you just shake off and go to the next game. It's like, hey, you got to take pride in stopping the run. Like Godchaux says, stop the run to have some fun. So that signing would kind of remind me of that.
Yeah, the one thing that worries me about Suh is that he's at the point of at his career where he's ring chasing still. Would he choose to come to New England over if he gets the same offer from Tampa Bay? Are we going to have to pay more money? And like you mentioned, we don't have a lot of cap space. So maybe he's just at the point where he's like, I want to go where I have the best chance to win, which might be Tampa Bay, might be somewhere else, wherever he gets the offer. That would be the one thing for me is I don't know if New England's in the win now situation that he would prefer being at 35 years old and, probably running out of NFL seasons left. So that's the one drawback I'd say to Ndamukong Suh coming to Foxborough. But let's move on. This is another defensive tackle that New England has had ties to. He played here shortly a couple of years ago, and it's another big 6'5", 332-pound defensive tackle in Akeem Hicks from the Chicago Bears. And I like Akeem Hicks. When he was here, I was always ecstatic to have him on the field. I think he, along with Suh, would both bring a veteran presence that have a lot of experience in this league, both stopping the run and getting to the passer. He never really was a great, pass rusher, which I don't think we need to. We have Barmore, we have Judon, we have guys that can do that. We need a guy in the center, like we talked about with Suh, that can plug up gaps, eat up the run game, and be a tone setter. So I like the idea of bringing in Akeem Hicks. I don't think he's going to be too much money. He's going to be 33 years old going into the season. He's 32 and a half right now. So by the end, he'll probably be 33. Well, definitely will be 33. And I think that this guy has experience shortly in New England. He would fit the mold if he wants to get out of Chicago, which I don't think he wants to go back there. But New England's an up and coming team. Maybe he can play a couple of years here and, teach some guys some things and come in when Godchaux's off. But I like the idea of bringing Akeem Hicks in and having him in the middle of the defense, probably more than I like Ndamukong Suh, but it's close.
I would have to agree with you there. And like you mentioned about the money aspect, we have $765,000 in cap space right now. So not even enough to sign our draft picks that we just made. We need to create, I think Pat's Cap on Twitter said that we need to create about 13 million just to have some flexibility during the season and to sign our draft picks this year. So we got to make a move either way, especially if we want to end up signing one of these guys. But the good thing about these players is that they're getting older a little bit to where you can probably sign them for a 1-year cheap deal. And that's something that's going to be to your advantage in this particular situation. So I like Hicks. One thing that's a little concerning, injuries. He's getting older. He had a ankle and a groin injury that kind of nagged him throughout the entire season. The groin the first half of the season and ankle the second half of the season. He has 3.5 sacks each of the last 2 years. Like you said, not really a guy who was known for rushing the passers his whole career. His career high in sacks is 8.5 in 2017 with the Bears, but that's still pretty good for an interior rusher. So 3.5 sacks is fine. He only played 9 games last year, and like I said, he was banged up for most of them. So a player that certainly is intriguing. I think a lot of Pats fans would like to see back in New England. Not at his best age, not his best health, not his peak of his career, obviously, but you can get a guy like this who can come in and contribute and play next to Barmore. Either of these past two guys, I think, would certainly help us out in the run game. So moving on to our last guy, though, defensive end Trey Flowers from the Lions. We all know Trey Flowers. He got that big deal with the Lions and hasn't really been the same player since. He's dealt with injuries. He's dealt with stuff like that the past couple of years. Another guy who 7 games last year, 7 games the year before, and only had 3.5 sacks combined in those 14 games he's played the past 2 years. So not ideal, not playing at his best right now, but he thrived in New England. He played really, really well in New England. His career high in sacks was 7.5. He had 7, 6.5, 7.5, 7 when he played for New England. He's a good player. And the one thing that concerns me a little bit about this is that since he left New England, we've changed schemes recently a little bit. So a guy like Trey Flowers would have to play in coverage more than he would have to in the past in New England. And that's not something that's going to be a strength of his. I know he's done that in Detroit some, but you don't really want Trey Flowers being a guy who's going to drop back in coverage and cover a linebacker or a receiver or anything like that, tight end. But he's a good player, a guy who certainly can set the edge, stop the run on the other side of Matt Judon. I think that 1-2 tandem would be really helpful for us in the run game and also in the pass game. You got somebody else on the other side who the teams are going to have to worry about a little bit. And Judon may get less double teams and may be able to get free more often. So if you can get a guy on the interior to take pressure off Barmore, and a guy who can stop the run, and then get a guy like Trey Flowers who can set the edge on the other side. And when it's a passing situation, maybe you throw Uche on the other side and it's Judon and Uche, Barmore. I think there's a lot of good situations you can put yourself in if you grab a couple of these players on this list.
Yeah, and it makes sense for Trey Flowers to come back here. It's a Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins,
Exactly.
those type of guys situations. Played his best football here. Goes to Detroit with Matt Patricia. Matt Patricia is now back here. It makes sense for him to come here and want to be back in New England where he plays best football. And I think that there's rumors out there that they've been saying that they will be interested in him. You know, they don't want to sign him before because of the comp pick formula, how that factors in before the draft. Now that's out the window. Go out, sign him, get whatever you can. And help this defense. I think that the one thing, like you mentioned, is dropping into coverage. His most coverage snaps in New England was 58. Matt Judon was taking he took 95 last year. So about half the snaps. And like you mentioned, I think that Bill does a great job of disguising schemes. I think he can put him as a 3-4 D end, and Judon can play maybe more of the 3-4 outside linebacker, or play 4-3 D end and put Judon at the end. So I think that there's ways that Bill will use him, but I agree. If you're putting him in 95 pass coverage snaps over the last year, or over the season, it's not going to look good. He thrives with his hand in the ground where he can get off the ball, use his speed and get off, and then stop the run. So he's a guy that it just makes too much sense for him not to come back to New England. And I hope that they both work out. There's not many guys on the list going through the available players that were still not signed. It's slim pickings. And a lot of these guys are on the list because they're old. They're not in their prime anymore. They've had injury history. And there's been, probably more red flags than not with most of the guys we've just shared. But New England has such a thin roster where they need to add guys. And Trey Flowers makes the most sense, knowing the scheme, knowing the coaching staff, still being being able to play good football. He's not going to be 2018 Trey Flowers. That would be great if he came back and was that, but he's probably not going to come back and be like that. But if he can be half of what he was, a little bit more than that, he'd be a great addition to a team that has not been able to stop the run consistently for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I agree with you there. They certainly could could use the help in that run game. I think we said on the live show the other day, I think they were 25th in stopping the run last year. Not great, especially when you add a guy like Gotcha to a 2-year deal and you paid him decent money. I can't remember what he's getting. I think he's getting close to like that 8 to 10 range, somewhere in there. But you sign a guy like that to a deal. Gotcha had one really good game. I think it was the first game against Buffalo, I believe. And then after the rest of the season, he was meh. He wasn't bad. He wasn't good though. He didn't really make a true impact. So hopefully he takes a step up. And if he does, maybe you don't need to sign one of these guys on the interior and you can keep him next to Barmore. But I still think regardless, unless Ronnie Perkins or unless they want to play Anthony Jennings on the edge on that other side or something, or find some creative way to have a guy who can stop the run. We don't have Van Noy. He just signed with the Chargers, so he's not going to be back, obviously. I think Trey Flowers makes all the sense in the world. The injuries, the age is a little concerning. But, I mean, 29 years old. He probably wants a 1-year cheap deal. Come back to New England. Have your best year of the past couple years at least. Have a good year. And then go get one more final payday. It's not going to be huge probably, but go get one more contract that's going to get you a little bit of a bag and secure you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and how you fix this situation with New England where they don't have to sign banged up veterans like this is you have the young guys step up. And frankly, New England is in a situation that has a bunch of young guys that have a ton of potential. I'm excited to see what Ronnie Perkins can do. We know that Josh Uche can get to the passer. If he can get better and run stopping, that would be better. If Godchild would live up to his contract, that would help Lawrence Guy. There's a lot of bodies on the roster that excite me, but they're not top tier. And, we've seen them the last couple of years continue to struggle. That's why in our minds, we're like, hey, we need to continue to add more and more guys on this roster that can help take the load off of some of these guys because they're not stars. They're probably not even, Pro Bowl players. Most of them aren't. They're just, dudes. And you got to have more than that if you want to continue to make a run in the playoffs. So make sure you guys like and subscribe, comment down below what you guys think of these three players, who you'd add in this list, whether that's an offensive tackle. Maybe you still think we need a receiver, but keep in mind the cap space is always going to be an issue with New England this year. So thank you guys for the continued support, and we'll talk to you later.